All right. Hello. Good evening, everybody. My name is Joe Kelly. I'm the program coordinator with the Rochester Hills Public Library, and I'd like to welcome you to tonight's program, Lost in Michigan, with author Mike Sonnenberg about his travels across Michigan. Before we get started, I'd like to just take a moment to remind you about our upcoming program we have next Thursday, which is on November 18th. That is a Zoom program. It is DNA testing for genealogy, pros and cons, costs and features, with Eric Madrigal of It's All Relative Genealogy. You can sign up for that at calendar.rhpl.org. For tonight, we ask audience members, please turn off your phones or silence them beforehand just to avoid any unnecessary disruptions during the program. We'd really appreciate that. The program tonight will be recorded. That's going to be available on the website about 1 week from tonight. It will be on the YouTube channel, and there should be a link to it on our website as well. So you could share that with any friends or family who weren't able to make it out tonight. And lastly, I'd like to just thank the Friends of the Rochester Hills Public Library who make a lot of these wonderful programs we're able to present for you guys possible with their fundraising efforts. So without further ado, let's get started with tonight's program and welcome Mike Sonnenberg. Mike.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Let's see. So to get started, I it's kind of strange that I'm here because I would have never imagined it. He introduced me as an author, and I would have never imagined in my wildest dreams that I'd be standing here as an author, with a published book. I know for a fact that my high school English teacher definitely would not believe it. We didn't really see eye to eye or agree on grammar very well. And even the stuff that I write now, I'm not necessarily the greatest with grammar, and it's probably not something that most authors would tell you. But originally I started out as a mechanical engineer. That's what I got an associate's degree in mechanical engineering. And I did that for like 20 plus years, did automotive tooling. Then as the automotive industry went up and down and through 9/11, then I transferred over to doing museum exhibits. And I worked at a company in Midland that did museum exhibits for a couple of years, and then the housing bubble burst and I lost my job then. Like I said, I was born and raised in Saginaw, still live in Saginaw. So at the time, the economy wasn't doing well, and I always enjoyed photography and traveling around Michigan. And luckily my wife had a good steady job, so she kept working and was, while the kids were in school, I'd just kind of head out and explore. I typically started around my hometown of Saginaw and taking pictures of Saginaw, and people really seemed to like it. And I did my best. I kind of took more like the pure Michigan kind of shots, the more the touristy kind of stuff, which if you're familiar with Saginaw's not really a tourist town. It's more of your industrial kind of community and that. So, but people, then, we get to the old train station, and I kind of, when I first posted, I'm like, I don't know if people are going to like it or not. But people seem to really kind of gravitate to it, and they just like, oh yeah, we still like all the old, historic buildings, and, even though they're not the greatest shape or whatever, we still like, remembering, the learning about the past. And as I traveled around, I still did a lot of like your typical like nature shots and things like that. So, that I guess, when you live in Michigan and you travel around, you go to Tequanamon Falls, Pictured Rocks. This is Sable Falls up in Pictured Rocks. There's Sleeping Bear Dunes. But then I've learned after a while, it's like, I go back to the falls, and there's basically it's this, the same thing, and it hasn't really changed. So then around I think 2013 is kind of when I really started doing Lost in Michigan, and people say, "Wow, we really like your Saginaw pictures. I wish you do, Michigan." Well, it was around 2013 that my son, he went into middle school and started running cross country. So then as he would run cross country, we would start traveling around, and I ended up kind of going to other communities that weren't really, I guess, tourist communities or whatever, and visiting different places. When we'd go south from Saginaw, we'd go through the town of Owasso, and this castle sits along the Shiawassee River in Owasso, and you kind of catch it out of the corner of your eye as you're going down the main road. And it's like, wow, that's neat, so I, kind of turned around, got, pictures of it. And that kind of is what set me off on, geez, what else, is out there that I can find. And so now I kind of make it a habit of, traveling the back roads. Let's see, that's good. And finding other kind of odd, interesting, unique things. I really don't limit to anything in particular. I just, whatever I think's interesting or different, I stop and get pictures of it. This is up in Marquette. This is the old orphanage in downtown Marquette. And I took this picture probably like 6-7 years ago. They say it's haunted. I don't necessarily, believe in everything's haunted. I'm not saying something is or isn't. It's not, it's just usually what I find fascinating when they say places are haunted, there's usually some sort of tragic history behind it. That, and that to me is usually a little bit more fascinating than, looking for the ghosts or whatever. So I took this picture, and sadly, a lot of places I get pictures that, are kind of old and abandoned or whatever. Usually it seems like a couple years after I take the pictures, oh, they tore it down, that's gone. Oh, okay, at least I got a picture of it. But in this case, somebody got grant money and they refurbished it and made it into like an apartment complex. I can't remember if it was like a complex for like veterans or just a low cost apartment complex or whatever. But I thought that was kind of interesting that they did go through and fix it up. I do like to visit a lot of lighthouses. Michigan, I think, has like 120 some lighthouses. And so I kind of have a habit of, if I'm out and about traveling around, I do like to get, to visit all the lighthouses. I kind of have a goal of visiting all the lighthouses in Michigan, and I've managed to get to all the ones that, are easy to get to that are like on land. There's a lot of them on islands that are much more of a challenge to get to. This is Chris Point Lighthouse. This is west of Whitefish Point. I don't know if you're familiar with this lighthouse, but to get to it, you got to go down like about 20 miles of dirt road. It's kind of off like, I think it's 123 that takes you to Tequanamon Falls, so it's kind of north of Tequanamon Falls. So you got to go down about 15 miles of dirt road and then like another 6-7 miles like 2-track trail to get to it. So it's really kind of out of the way. And one thing I've learned too is when you start getting away from the main road in the UP, you don't have self-service to rely on. You say there's the road. I went down it. It was kind of like the rainy season late in the fall, and it had rained a lot, so it was getting pretty muddy. You might notice there's like a sign off to the left-hand side. That's what the sign says when you read it. It's at this spot on April 24th, 2015. The Michigan State Police rescued 2 sisters from Oklahoma and Nebraska who had survived stuck in their SUV in the snow for 13 days. They survived on Girl Scout cookies and Cheetos. So, and I remember that happening too, and I remember them posting it like on the news that they were looking for these 2 women, and they were going out looking at lighthouses. And I said to my wife, I said, I bet you they went to Chris Point Lighthouse. And I said, that, you don't want to do that in April because they don't have enough snow for the snowmobilers, but there's enough snow to get your 4-wheel drive stuck. So, and the odd thing was, it was my stepmom's cousin. He was a pilot for the state police, and he's the one that spotted them in the state police helicopter. This is a fire station over by Allendale. It's west of Grand Rapids. I don't know if you know where like Grand Valley College is. My son had like an indoor track meet there, and I needed time to kill, so I was driving around and I came across this old fire station, and it's kind of weird. It's like a big city fire station, but it's kind of like in the middle of nowhere. And it was afterwards that I found out. I was like, they had this it stood in Grand Rapids, and they had planned on demolishing it. So they ended up tearing it down brick by brick and rebuilt it in Allendale, and now it's used as a firehouse museum. So it's like, I would have, just driving around and I just like, wow, what's that? And my wife, she gets to the point where it's like I'm driving along and I'll see something, as long as there's nobody behind me, or especially like I'm on a back road, I'll hurry up and slam on the brakes and stop and get some pictures. This is a Buka Lodge in Sleeping Bear Dunes, and as I travel around, I try to find other locations, that, are a little bit more off the beaten path, a little bit out of the way, rather than just using, the normal touristy things or I guess it's part of just growing up in Michigan. After a while, it's like once you've done like the dune climb and kind of the main scenic drives at Sleeping Bear Dunes, it's like, okay, what else, is there? And I found that this lodge originally was built. It was like a family cabin, and they had, I think the pond that you see in front of it, they use that as like a cranberry bog, and they grew cranberries. But eventually, I think the original owners, they had died, and their family, I think, willed it or sold it to the National Park Service. So now it's part of the Sleeping Bear Dunes. This house is over on the west bluff of Mackinaw Island. My wife and I, we went there years ago, shortly after we were married, and I still remember we went by this house, and there was like a little sign in front of it that said, that this house was built by the guy that invented the file folder. And it always kind of stuck in the back of my mind. So then years later, we went back. I think when my kids were like 10 years old or so, and my kids wanted to go to Mackinac Island. So we went over there and we went by the house, and I see the sign was no longer there, but I remember the house. It was a very distinctive house. And it always stuck in the back of my mind. It's like, somebody took, a piece of cardboard, folded it together, and invented the manila folder. It doesn't seem like, that complicated of an invention, but I guess somebody had to do it. So, I did a little research and found out that, there was a guy from Chicago, he was Amberg, I think was his name, that he did invent the file folder, and he had kind of filed a patent for it, and he had gotten quite a bit of money selling file folders and file cabinets or whatever from Chicago. So he had bought this house. It was already built. I think he had bought it on Mackinac Island, but then I think somebody did sue him and say that, no, you really couldn't patent it because it wasn't complicated enough to patent. So I think he did lose his patent, but I figure he must have did pretty well because he could buy a house on Mackinac Island. This is, I think, is a Brush Park downtown Detroit. I took this, probably 6-7 years ago. I know I posted this picture and somebody made a comment. They were mad at me for posting nice pictures of Detroit, which I was kind of confused by that. But I've always kind of had this kind of habit of kind of showing different sides of play. There was especially 8 years ago or so, especially when Detroit, I think that was when Detroit filed bankruptcy, and there was a lot of, popularity showing like the abandoned houses and stuff. And so I kind of went around and got pictures of some of the nicer houses and that. I thought it was really interesting. I went back about 3 years ago, I think, right, maybe a little bit before the pandemic. My daughter went to a concert at the Red Wings Stadium. And when I took this picture, there was like nothing around there at the time. It was like from that, like if you were in that house looking out those windows, you could see like Ford Field and Tiger Stadium and stuff. And then I go back and it's like, geez, it's all apartment buildings, and they got, the new stadium. And it's like, it's amazing how much it has changed, since I've been down there. This is the barracks at Fort Wayne. This is, be west of Detroit along the Detroit River. It's like an old fort that was built like in the 1840s, a little bit before the Civil War. It was never, I think they had cannons and stuff there and they did training, but there was a tour guy that gave us a tour, and he said they never fired a shot like during a battle or anything. They originally built it because at the spot, it was like the narrowest spot in the Detroit River where Canada's on the other side. So I was kind of, I tell it's like, they were being ready for the Canadian invasion, but it never happened. So they mainly used it for training. They used the fort, I want to say up until like the 70s. I know my dad said that he went through there when he was for Vietnam. He went through there, and I guess since today's Veterans Day, I should also thank everybody here that's a veteran. But I know a lot, when I post a picture too, a lot of veterans said, "Oh yeah, I remember going through Fort Wayne. That's where they first, get on the bus or whatever, and then they do their enlistment and do their paperwork and everything there." I know when I told my wife, I was like, "Yeah, I want to go to Fort Wayne," and she was like, "Well, that's in Indiana." I'm like, "No, the Fort Wayne in Detroit," and she's like, "No, Fort Wayne's in Indiana." And I was like, "I know, not the city of Fort Wayne. It's a fort that's Fort Wayne in Detroit." So, oh, okay, So, they gave us a tour. Supposedly, they said that somebody, I think, had fell from the barracks and was supposed to be haunted, and there's all sorts of kind of odd stories in that going, that they had told us about the fort. But I was really surprised though that a lot of people that they really don't know that fort's even there. I know there's like, the fort like up at Mackinaw City, Mackinaw Island, and there's, some other historic, locations around, I'm trying to think, there's like I don't know, but it was really surprising that here's this fort down on Detroit. It was used during World War I, World War II. They said all the like the vehicle parts, the truck parts, and Jeep parts and stuff. They would kind of run it through the fort, where they would load the trains and ship out parts. So it was a very actively used fort. It just really was never used in combat. Took this picture on a recent trip, like about 2 months ago. This is, if you're familiar with the Keweenaw Peninsula, this is up in the town of Gay. Mostly it's known for the Gay Bar. There's not really a whole lot left in the town other than the bar and a few houses, an old schoolhouse, and this chimney. This was from the old stamping mill. Normally when I take pictures, especially like kind of older abandoned places, I just take them from the road and kind of move on. I don't like to trespass. I don't want to get somewhere that I could fall, get hurt or something like that. So I don't really encourage other people to. But when I was up and looking at it, there was like a pathway that went out and signage and stuff like that. So I figured it was open, and I went out and got some pictures, and then a nice lady come up and she's like, "Oh, can I, you need to know anything?" Or I was like, "No, I'm just getting some pictures." Oh, she goes, "Well, I work the museum right around the corner that's in the old schoolhouse. And I can tell you all about, the stamping mill." And I guess it was like the early 1900s. It was like one of the most productive stamping mills. They'd bring in like all the copper ore and train loads, and then the mill would like crush it down into basically sand, and then they'd extract the copper out of it, and then all the sand, the leftover sand, they would just put in the Lake Superior. And so now that the stamping mill's basically gone, it closed in like the 1930s, but now they have issues with all the sand left over from the mill, so they're kind of getting it away from the beach because it's all kind of eroding into Lake Michigan. But I just thought that was kind of interesting that, as I'm there, I come across somebody that was nice enough to kind of show me around and tell me about the place. This is, I think, was it Highland State Park? I think it is, down 59. This is the old Edsel Ford home. The Haven Hills, I think it was. They had used it, and they rode their horses. They had like a horse stable. And I just kind of find it really interesting too. I was just there about 2 months ago. I thought it was rather interesting that here's a, it was like the foundations, the chimney and stuff. You can even see like this little circle. It says living room on it. They had it marked on the different places, the foundation of, the living room, the kitchen, the bedroom, the dining room. It was a really nice, large mansion that had burned down, and they stopped using it like in like the 50s or 60s, donated it to the state, and they had it as part of the state park, and they were using it, but then they had a fire in I think the 80s and it burned down. So basically just the foundations left. But I found it really interesting that here's, like the state park, I find a lot of different historical locations within the state parks that I think a lot of people don't know about. This is Nonesuch Ghost Town. This is in Porcupine Mountains State Park. And it's strangely enough, there's like a little trail that goes out to it, and there's like a little waterfall and stuff, but you really don't see much, talked about, some of the old ghost towns. There's like 3 or 4 ghost towns in Porcupine Mountains that they really don't talk about. So a lot of people go to Lake of the Clouds. I've been there, and it's just like, if you're there, you really shouldn't be missing Lake of the Clouds. But I know when I was up there, this would have been the beginning of October. I couldn't believe how many cars and people and stuff that was there, especially you go to the popular tourist spots. I mean, you can't even find a place to park. There's so many people there. And this was like on a Tuesday during the middle of the week. I just was shocked, how busy, places are. So like I said, I kind of been trying to find more places that are a little bit lesser known to most tourists. This is the Ora Labora. Well, no, this is the old Bayport Cemetery. And this was next to what they call the Ora Labora colony. I have a tendency to kind of hang out in cemeteries a lot because some of the places that I kind of find out about or research, or as I'm researching one thing, I'll learn about something else. And I found out about this colony. This is over in the Thumb, kind of by Caseville. It's by Bayport, and it was a colony, like, let's see, it was right before the Civil War. They had this like a minister come from, I think from like Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area, and he started a colony where, it was a group of people that all pooled their resources and everything together. They built cabins, and they had cattle, and they did farming, and started doing some lumbering and stuff. And then I think really what kind of really killed off the colony is the Civil War. A lot of the young men in the colony, they all kind of got pulled into the war, so they didn't really have people help them with the farming and stuff. So then the colony just kind of died off. But that's basically all that's really left of it is the cemetery. One thing that I've found since I started doing my website and kind of posting pictures and traveling around is I'll have people that'll tell me, oh, you should go check out this place, or they can't, tell me about, some place that they live that, they know, that the locals know about that other people don't. And so I had somebody that this is by Cedar Lake, I think is the name of the town. It's out like 46 west of Alma. And there's this 2-story outhouse, and she's, oh, you got to see the 2-story outhouse. So I'm like, well, yeah, I definitely need to see the 2-story outhouse. And off in the wood, this was kind of a little bit back off the road. There was a house, like a big house in front of it, but they had a fire. I want to say, because I took this picture, this was probably 8 years ago. I took this picture. And there was like a big house in front of it that had just burnt down. They still had like, the pile, charred lumber and everything in front of it. And from what I found out, as the story goes, it was a 2-story outhouse, but the building in front of it was a 2-story building. It was like a saloon and general store below, and then the owner and his family lived up above, and he had like 3 or 4 daughters, and he had all these lumberjacks coming in, Well, he didn't want his daughters socializing with the lumberjacks, so he built this 2-story outhouse with like a bridge that goes over to the upper level. So then his family would use the upper level, and then the people would use the one below. And I know now most people think, okay, there's a hole on top and a hole on bottom, but they weren't one right on top of the other. The hole on top was further back with like a board between it. And then the odd thing was too, I didn't add that picture, but at Fayette Historic State Park, they got like a hotel that had a 2-story house too. I guess it was somewhat common. I mean, before indoor plumbing, you had to go somewhere. So there are a few 2-story outhouses around, but this one was, most people like in the middle of mid Michigan were quite familiar with this one. Unfortunately, though, this had collapsed a few years after I took the picture. So whoever owns the property now or whatever, they did build like a replica of it that still stands there on the property now. This is up in Pequaming. I don't know if you know where like Lance is. I pronounce it L Ants, but I think mostly it's pronounced Lance, at the kind of the base of the Keweenaw Peninsula. This was the old Ford community. Actually, it was a sawmill that Ford had bought, and it was kind of like a community town. He had his own sawmill, housing, store. I think Ford even had like a summer residence there. It was kind of an interesting place. It still has a water tower that says Ford on it. But for the most part, I think they quit using wood in cars. So, they didn't really need the sawmill anymore. So that kind of faded away. And this old powerhouse building is still left over from the sawmill. Probably one of the more unique places I've been in Michigan is what they call the Rock Cut. This is over through the Huron Mountains. This is kind of between the Keweenaw Peninsula and Marquette. There's kind of that whole like section that's really kind of hilly and remote. The one thing in the Huron Mountains too is Mount Arvon is the highest place in Michigan. That's located not too far from this. But there was in the early 1900s the Huron Railroad. There was somebody that had the brilliant idea of running a railroad through the Huron Mountains, and he was going to cut timber and haul the timber out. And so they started building a railroad, and this is one of the rocky, I don't know, I'm not a geologist, so I don't know if it's granite or what kind of rock it is, but I'm sure it was a lot of work cutting through all that rock with, picks and dynamite and everything. And so they got like halfway, they got that like half the railroad built, and then I think they finally gave up. So this is basically what's left of the railroad is this rock cut through the woods there. This is Wajimega up by Caro. It's now part of the Caro State Hospital. My wife, when we were dating, her grandmother, she lived not too far from Caro, so we'd go by this place to go visit her, and it's like, to me, it kind of, I got, kind of a black and white picture, but it's actually kind of like a tan building with like a tile roof, kind of like a Southwestern style building. I have a tendency, if you've seen any of my posts, if you follow along, I tend to do black and white pictures, especially when we start getting into after fall. It's pretty gray and gloomy through most of Michigan, especially the southern part of the state. You can see, there's a little bit of snow there. So I tend to kind of do more black and white kind of pictures just because I still like to travel around and take pictures year round. So we go visit my wife's grandma, and we go by this place, and there's probably like 10, 15 buildings, like that. And I was like, what is that Wajimega place? It's, it's like, it looks like a resort. And she goes, oh, that was the epileptic colony. And she goes, yeah, that, was, actually my wife's grandma worked there at the hospital, and it kind of had it started out, I think, with good intentions. It was a place for people that, because they didn't really understand epilepsy, that they had a farm and a place for people to live and take care of them and stuff. But then they kind of started practicing what they call eugenics, where they kind of had this belief that people that were like lower class citizens, they would sterilize them. So they did a lot of like mass sterilizations and stuff through like the 1920s to the 1950s or whatever. And so they kind of, it fell out of favor, and they started learning more about epilepsy and other ways of treating people and helping people with issues. So there's all these buildings still standing, and I think a lot of it is because they're probably had a lot of asbestos in them, and for the cost of them to tear them down and deal with the asbestos, they kind of let them sit. And so it's kind of weird to go past this place and see all these buildings. Like I said, I tend to do a lot of lighthouses, so I kind of had to show one of my more recent lighthouse pictures. I did the Shepler's boat tour, and we went out to see the lighthouses. Oh, they'd be on the west side of the straits, and this is White Shoals Lighthouse. I know it wasn't necessarily the bright, sunny Michigan summer day, but to me, I'm kind of fine with it, because I think, to me, the dark, cloudy skies, to me, that's what the lighthouse is for, is those days that aren't perfect days. I won't lie to you, I do know how to use Photoshop, and I do have a tendency, I like to, change my pictures to tell a story. So, like I said, like the light, I can use Photoshop to turn. I figured, to me, a lighthouse should have a light on it, so I just do it in Photoshop. It depends on the picture. Some I do, more. Some I do less. But I like I tell people, it's like I'm not a journalist. I'm more somebody that trying to tell a story and kind of share my experiences. So, like I said, I started in Saginaw, and I figured I might as well end my presentation with, this is my hometown. This is probably the most famous building in Saginaw. This is the Waterworks building, and they decorate it for Christmas every year. So I figured, since we're getting close to the Christmas season, I figured I'd end my presentation there. Like I said, I still keep traveling around. The more I travel, it's kind of strange. The more I travel, it's like I keep thinking, like, man, at some point I'm going to run out of places to visit. But then the more I travel, the more kind of stuff I learn and different places I see. I'll be honest with you, this is the first time I've even been to Rochester Hills and stuff. I've been a little bit north here towards like Romeo and stuff, but I've never really been in this area a whole lot. I wanted to come down earlier and get pictures, but then they're like, oh, it's going to rain all day, and or at least rain at night, and then with the time change and it gets dark. And then I know they always do the Christmas lights, but I figure it's still too early for them to be on, so I didn't really get around too much to get pictures, although I did manage to go through the cemetery and get some pictures of the cemetery. But like I said, I still keep kind of traveling around. My goal is I try to do a post a day. I don't travel as much as I'd like to, but I still try to get out once a week or every other week. It's going to be a challenge as now that the trees are losing their leaves and it's going to be kind of gray. But I guess, like I say, that's kind of the end of my presentation as far as, kind of what I do, how I do, and how I ended up here. Is there any, while we're here, is there any questions or anything? So the question is, what's the main way I find the places? When I first started out, I would leave like Saginaw. My kid dropped the kids off from school, and I would just kind of like just take a drive around within an hour or two of Saginaw, and I would just kind of go. I'd look on the map for like different towns, and I'd just find stuff. But then, as I traveled more, especially the further away I traveled, I kind of need like a game plan of, okay, especially, if I'm going to go to the drive to the UP and spend, 3-4 days in UP, I kind of at least have to have some idea where I'm going. So I tend to do, like the Michigan historical markers, and that is kind of a pretty good reference point. I still do look at, like small towns, especially like you get in the Upper Peninsula. I mean, it's like, a lot of towns, they're so spread out and stuff. So you can kind of get small towns. And then usually between going from one place that or one or two places I know about, and then I kind of like, oh, wow, what's that? Or I see, I kind of see something that I find interesting along the way. So that's, like I say, I kind of use Google Maps and that to kind of start looking for, like I say, before it was just kind of roaming around, but then I realized it's like, especially when gas gets pretty expensive, it's like, okay, I need to kind of make the most of my time, especially if I go, a long ways. If it's just an afternoon from my house, but the problem is, it's like I've pretty much been down almost every road, close to my house. So it's like, I'll say down the Detroit metro area is probably an area that I'm kind of behind on, I guess, or, less, just because I'd rather drive up north where there's not a whole lot of traffic or people than when you come down here, it's not as enjoyable of a drive as far as traffic wise goes. So I know somebody had another question. My website is www.lostinmichigan.net, and I've done 5 books on my Lost in Michigan, and I'm just about to release another book on lighthouses. So that's, yeah, I'm doing it for a living. I make pretty decent. Now that I've been selling, publishing enough books, I make okay money, but it's like I've been very fortunate that my wife has a full-time job, and the biggest thing is she has a job with good benefits. So, like I said, originally I did engineering wise and stuff, and I know a lot of people that follow me tend to be more, I don't want to say old, I'll say experienced. And a lot of them are used, well, I thought you were older and stuff, because I think they figured I'm retired and traveling around. And it's like, yeah, I wish I had, a steady income that I probably though, if I was retired, I probably would never publish a book, because I would just be driving around, just taking pictures or whatever. But I did find it a very interesting and learning experience. So is there? My camera is the technical is a Canon 5D Mark II. It's about 10 years old, but I'll be honest with you, it's not the camera. It's the Photoshop and the time traveling around to find places. But I will say, like I said, I try to do pictures year round. So like when we start getting into January, February, and there's no snow on the ground and everything's pretty blah. That's why I kind of tend to do like black and white. I kind of try to do, kind of cloudy kind of pictures that kind of have some sort of mood. Just, it may not be the happy, pretty sunshine, sunset kind of pictures, but I figure at least as long as I got something that looks interesting, that's kind of what makes me happy. So, are there any other? Yeah, I got a drone. Actually, I got a drone for Christmas. I think I've used it twice so far, and I don't know. To me, my problem with it is every time I get it out, it's like, I don't know, maybe it's because I got a cheap drone, but it's like by the time I turn it on, I get it set up, then you got to like spin it around this way, so it gets it calibrated, and then you get, and it's like, by the time I kind of get where I'm going, I like to get kind of my pictures and explore, and then I kind of move on and go to the next thing, and so I don't know. There's still stuff I still kind of want to do more with it, and then too, the other thing is it seems like there's a lot of regulations with drones, especially like you can't fly so close, too close to historic building, and you can't fly over people, and so like there's some places I think, well, it'd be really neat, to fly to Quantamon Falls. They got signs, you can't fly a drone without, written permission or what, probably because they had so many people there. They if they didn't have a drone restriction, they'd have 15 drones flying around in the air all the time. So yeah, I've kind of played with it, but I still haven't got it figured out. And then I kind of dabbled with video a little bit, and then I realized, it's a lot, very time consuming to go through and edit, video and so I kind of just stuck with my photos. I do my blog post every day, and even I know I get people kind of frustrated with me because I don't give exact locations and stuff on my website, but I've kind of, especially like if I post something that's, like an old farmhouse or something that's private property and stuff, I don't necessarily know that I want to tell a whole bunch of people exactly where it's at. And then I figure some of the other stuff that, it takes you a couple minutes on Google. If you really want to know where it's at, you can look it up on Google. And I figure my feeling is it's, kind of the way I've kind of learned to find things and explore is just go out and explore and go look for stuff. And I think, while you're looking for one thing, you find something else. So I know I kind of went off a little bit tangent, but did that answer your question as far as the drone? So I'm still trying. I don't know. There's times it's like I'm driving away. It's like, oh, wow, I could have flew the drone. Oh, well, I'm already halfway down the road. So any other questions? I'm going to. I'm trying to think. I will say, yeah, the cemeteries. I don't know if it's kind of a generational thing. I know, like with like your younger generation, going, and even for me, for a while, going into visiting some of the older cemeteries and stuff seemed kind of weird. But I know when they originally were built, they were meant to be more of like a park-like setting, and that. I know. Some of the places, especially you get like up in UP, some of the places I get to tends to be more down like dirt roads and stuff that aren't as visited. I don't know if they're not visited because people don't know about them, or if they're just kind of more of a remote location kind of thing. But yeah, like I said, I just kind of try to find just anything. To me, it's anything that looks interesting, and that. And I will say, I think there's times that I've posted or kind of shared pictures, and they've kind of, I guess, gone viral or whatever, where I've noticed that, I find, take some pictures of it, and then all of a sudden, like a year or two later, you see a lot more pictures, a lot more interest on the internet, and I go back and I visit, and it's like, the last time I was there was nobody there, and now there's like, 6 or 7 cars there and other people there and stuff, so I think somebody else had a question. Yeah, normally, my wife and kids have gone with me sometimes, and they get rather annoyed with me because I drive a lot, I stop a lot, and I used to, when I first started, I'd take my dog Cooper along. He'd go with me, but he's 12. He'll be 12 years old this spring, and he's a 120-pound lab, and he's starting to get arthritis and stuff, and he's too big for me to pick up and put in the Jeep. And that, so he used to be able to jump up into the Jeep, but so he doesn't really go with me anymore. I used to take him on road trips, but yeah, a lot of people especially like if I'm in the UP or somewhere like a ways from home, I want to kind of make the most of my time and try to visit a lot of different places. So a lot, and it's like, like my last trip to the UP, I did like 1,800 miles in 3 days. So I mean, I drive a lot. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm just kind of used to it. I don't know. I, I know, but when I do go by myself, especially like when I'm in the UP, like when I go like up in the Keweenaw, or I go, so like when to Chris Point Lake, I'll call my wife or text her and say, just so you know, I'm going to this lighthouse. I'll be, if you don't hear from me by the end of the night, this is where I'm at, because I know, it was kind of where I just at, when I was at Copper Harbor, the visitor center advertises they have a phone, because there's no cell service up there. And I just always thought that was kind of funny. It's like, this big sign, yes, we have a phone, because I'm sure there's people that are just beside themselves because they can't use their phone. So like I said, I've learned that, if I kind of go way off the beaten path, I kind of let my wife or somebody know. It's like, hey, this is where I'm going. So if you don't hear from me, at least you got some idea where I'm at. There was, the highest point in the lower peninsula is over by Cadillac. I can't remember the name of the hill. I was going to go to it. There's like this really rugged kind of trail. I think they cut down trees and put hills because they didn't want people like on motorcycles and ATVs going up the road. So they really made it a real challenge to get to it. And I started going up to it, and then I realized it's like nobody knows I'm here. I didn't tell my wife I was going. It was, kind of rainy out. I said all I need to do is, break an ankle or slip and fall climbing over one of the trees or something. And so I kind of, I'm going to turn around and go back and figure that's one of those trips I'll have to wait and make my son or somebody go with me, just, so in case one of us gets hurt or something. I've kind of learned it's like I kind of got to at least be smart about being by myself. So, any other? That and on Sugar Island, the one behind the church way up. I'd seen something about it, and then there is like a little sign behind the church that says cemetery. So you go up the trail and stuff, and yeah. I tell you, so the more remote it is, the more I like it. So, like you said, there's times I'm trying to think. The first time I went to what's up there by Chris Point Lighthouse, the life-saving station. I went way down. I mean, I'm going and going and going, and then all of a sudden the road was nothing, just but water. And I'm like, oh man. So then I had to turn around and go back. And then I went back a few years later, and I was like, yeah, last time there was somebody there that was like working there. And I was like, yeah, I was here a couple years ago, but then the road was like washed out. You go, yeah, the beavers built a dam and it flooded over the road. So we had to, knock the dam out or whatever. So it's like, yeah, so I tend to get, kind of far out, kind of more remote. But, yeah. That's a good question. That's kind of where I'm told my wife, I said, I almost start looking at, maybe doing Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, kind of start branching out. I figure I got maybe a couple more Michigan books that I can do, and then it's like, do I start, expanding out? I was like, I could drive through Ohio just as easy. By the time I drive up to the UP and do all that driving, I could drive down through Ohio, and so I kind of been starting to look at, whether I want to start, expanding out and finding other places to go visit. But right now my wife, she still works full time. She just got to a point where I think she can, get her, she's like, her pension's locked in, but my kids are still in college and stuff. So I'm like, yeah, we still need to keep working until they're done with school, and then kind of go from there. When I go up to the UP, I literally, I just sleep in the back of my Jeep. I just find like a national forest campground or a state forest campground and put the $15 in the post and just sleep in my Jeep, so I don't spend a whole lot of money. And I know if I start traveling in Ohio and stuff, then I got to start, probably looking for hotels or whatever and spend a little bit more money. But yeah, I'm thinking about it. So I know there was. No, I've been doing four-wheeling since I got out of high school, and generally I used to be the guy that would pull everybody out. Actually, I had a old 3/4 ton Ford with a PTO winch and everything on it and stuff. So I've done quite a bit of four-wheeling. But now I got my little Jeep, but when I'm by myself, and then I got a winch for my Jeep and everything, but it's like, I've learned, it's like, if I'm not sure about it, I'm not chancing it, because it's like, I'm getting too old to be stranded out in the middle of the woods. So is there any other questions? Well, I thank everybody for coming out. I hope you enjoyed, my presentation. I did bring some books with me if you want some books. They're $15 each. But like you see, this isn't a timeshare presentation. You're more than free to leave or whatever. If you just want to come up and say hi, I know sometimes some people bring books for me to sign or whatever. That's fine too. But I say thanks for coming out, and drive safe going home, because I know we're getting the storm coming through. So.